Welcome to Evolve Your Life, the podcast where values meet vision, ambition meets alignment, and family fuels your purpose. I'm Dr. Stefanie Ascher, chiropractor, entrepreneur, homeschool mom, cancer warrior, and your go-to girl for building harmony in every area of life. Around here, women step into living fully and authentically, and we believe you are capable and worthy of it all. So grab your coffee, get cozy, and let's evolve your life together. Welcome to Evolve Your Life. You are capable, you are worthy, and it's time to evolve your life. On today's episode, before we dive into everything that this podcast will be about, I think it's important to start with the story that started it all, the pivotal moment for me. When we look back on our lives, we have conversations, moments, days, weeks, sometimes even seasons of our lives that change everything for us. Mine wasn't a specific moment or a specific day, but it was really a 1 week span of time that felt like the longest week of my life. I am a cancer survivor. It's been just over 2 years since I finished my treatment journey. And a lot of times you see in movies people being told you have cancer. That was not my story. So I'm going to paint the picture for you of what life looked like during this time. I was absolutely fine until I wasn't. And that progression happened really quickly. I was on a trip with my family to Orlando and I couldn't keep up with my kids at the arcade. And for anyone who knows me, I am an Energizer bunny. I am 200 miles an hour all the time and I was just dragging. We went back to our Airbnb and I felt really feverish. We came home the next day and I was pretty much down and out. It was a Sunday. I just laid around all day. And then on Monday morning, I was on the floor in my bathroom just crying because I didn't feel like I had the energy or the ability to work that day. Now, at this point in time, I was a solo practitioner in my chiropractic office. And so not working was not a luxury that I had at that point in time. I probably had 60 to 80 people scheduled that day. And if I wasn't there, there was no one to take care of them. So I went to work and I was trying so hard to push through the morning shift. And I ended up having to cancel the rest of my morning and the afternoon, which is something that I have never in my life done before. I have worked through it all: colds, flus, actively miscarrying, you name it, I've worked through it. And I just couldn't. And so that day, I had to drag myself to the car. On the way home, I shared my location with my husband and told him, I just want you to have my location because I'm feeling extremely unwell. I don't even know if I can make it home. My body was so heavy and slow. Once I got home, I physically crawled inside my house and got into bed. My x-rays had showed a lung full of pneumonia, or what we thought was pneumonia. And so my husband went and picked up my medications, which I had not taken an antibiotic in probably over 10 years. I don't even take ibuprofen. So he comes home with an inhaler and an antibiotic, and I could not get my hands on that inhaler fast enough. But laying in bed that day, I couldn't even open my eyes. I couldn't move. I had to be carried to the restroom. I was so feverish. And it was like an elephant was sitting on my chest. Before that day, slowly over time, I had had a cough, and it was allergy season in Florida. So a lot of people were having coughs, and mine was very insignificant. It was a little cough here and there. It had started to increase over time to what was then a deep, barky, dry cough. My energy levels had been tanking, really plummeting, but I was in a hustle season. The office was thriving, it was growing a lot. All of the responsibility was on me. I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had 2 little kids, a 1 and a 4-year-old, a thriving chiropractic office, and I was the end all and be all for a lot of people. And I was wearing so many hats and trying to do my best to succeed in every way. And it was absolutely self sacrificing to the point where I was ignoring the red flags in my body. I was still breastfeeding my youngest son at this point in time. So I justified the night sweats that I had been having to hormonal shifts. I had been losing a lot of weight, but I was also training for a triathlon. I was boxing, running, cycling, lifting. I was doing it all. And what I thought was my body burning out ended up being an illness that was starting to take over my body. After 3 weeks of antibiotics not working, no improvement, and my symptoms continually progressing, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I happened to cough when I was looking in the mirror. And right in the base of my neck, next to my clavicle, I saw a large lump pop up when I coughed. I also then noticed that I had a lump on the front of my chest, like a little swollen spot. And so I called my doctor, and she met me that day on a Sunday, and we had a very clear conversation that went along the lines of, I'm not exactly sure why you're not responding, why it's not improving, but I think we need to get a CT scan. Your options are you can go to the emergency room today and get a scan done, or we can schedule it for Tuesday of this week. And so we went ahead and scheduled it for Tuesday. And that Sunday was the day that it hit me that things weren't right. The red flags that I was ignoring had all compiled into a flashing light in my head that said, I have cancer. I looked at my husband. I was sitting on the couch, and I just looked at him and said, I can't believe it, but I have cancer and I don't have time for this. I was frustrated. I was angry. I knew that life as I knew it would never be the same. What I didn't know was how drastically it would change or how severe my health was at this point. 2 days later, I went and had a CT scan done. Ironically, one of my patients was the one who performed the scan, and he rushed the results. So instead of waiting a week, I received them that evening when I was sitting in bed. And the results shook me to my core. The CT scan read, patient has a massive tumor in her left lung. At this point in time, everything just stopped. I didn't know what I was facing, what kind of cancer it was, and I thought that they messed up the report because the dimensions in centimeters that they were sharing on my CT scan was equivalent to about a 6-inch by 7-inch by 5-inch tumor taking over my left lung. The next morning, I had a phone call with my doctor, and she informed me that she was contacting the oncology office and they would be calling me to get me in that same day. And just for reference into the state of mind that I was in at this point in my life, where I was just hustling and grinding and pushing forward for success, I said, okay, great, but I have work this morning, so I can't go until this afternoon. I was always prioritizing other people, other people's needs, what people wanted from me, what people needed from me. So we scheduled the appointment for that afternoon. And then I had to make the hardest phone call of my life. I picked up the phone and I called my mom. And we were on FaceTime, and I had my dad get on the phone too. And I let them know what the results were. There is nothing like having to tell your parents who love you and adore you how sick you are. And at this point, I was so concerned about how my family and my friends would feel about this that I wasn't shedding tears. I was trying so hard to hold it together for everybody else. I wanted to be strong for everybody. And so I told them, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. No matter what, this too shall pass. Everything's going to be fine. This is where we're at. We don't have answers yet. I'm going to the doctor this afternoon. It didn't really make sense, But there was a part of me that was already feeling comforted and surrounded in a type of strength that can only come from God Himself. That afternoon, I went to the doctor and I did not hear the words, "You have cancer." It was so glaringly obvious to everybody that I had cancer. I had the weight loss, I had the night sweats, my lab work was off the charts. The tumor was huge. I was having visible signs of change with the blood supply in my neck and in my chest. My breathing patterns were extremely dysregulated. I had a rapid heartbeat. My body was being overtaken. And so the next course of action was we need to order a PET scan and an echocardiogram stat. So when I went up to check out, I was shocked to see that stat for a PET scan was a week out. And so I took the appointment, but I was very unsettled by that. So I went home, and over the course of that week, the next couple days, I was just feeling really uncertain about the timing of things. My body was not doing well. And so the following day on Thursday, I was making phone call after phone call, and come to find out the reason that they pushed my PET scan out was because they were waiting for insurance approval, but I am a self-pay patient, so I did not need that approval, and they were able to move the scan up to the next day. So on Friday, I had my first PET scan, and laying in that machine was one of the most difficult and challenging moments of my entire life. Because of how large the tumor was, I was not able to lay flat. I was extremely short of breath. I could barely make it through a sentence without coughing. And I had to lay flat and still with my arms over my head for 20 minutes. I had lost all feeling in my hands because of the blood supply that was so compromised in my chest and in my neck. And it was the hardest thing that I had to do, to lay there and not move when I felt like I was being suffocated. I don't know how I made it through that scan, but I did. And then we went on with the weekend while we waited for results. Something that's really important is that we trust our intuition and our guts feeling when it's telling us something isn't right. Because I knew waiting a week for that scan was not right. And I'm so thankful that I pushed for that. Because 2 days later, on that Sunday, I started rapidly declining. My fever came back. It was very difficult to move my body. I was starting to have trouble just even sitting upright. I had no strength. I called my doctor on call over the weekend on that Sunday and told him what was going on. He was able to pull up my PET scan results from Friday, and he said, "You need to go to the emergency room right now. This tumor is massive. It's wrapping around your heart, and we don't have time to wait." So I called my mom over. She came to hang out with the boys, and off to the emergency room I went. I was ready for answers. This had been about a month-long process at this point in time, and I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I knew I was sick. I knew what I was about to face, and I had so much peace and comfort in just knowing that an answer was coming, and I was ready to face whatever was coming my way. Through that week of navigating really difficult conversations with the people closest to me and preparing to share the news with my patients, I was prioritizing being strong, being joy filled, and being grateful for every second that I had. I knew how severe the disease in my body was. What I didn't know was how much time I was going to have left. The most important thing to me was that I faced this journey in a way that if I didn't make it, the people in my life would remember me a very specific way. I wanted them to remember a big, bright smile, a fierce strength, unwavering determination and resilience, and a joy filled heart, no matter what life circumstances brought. I went to the hospital ready to fight. What I was about to fight, I had no idea, but I was ready, and I knew I wasn't in it alone. I knew God's hand was with me. I knew that He was walking with me and ahead of me, and He already saw how this was all going to play out, and I had so much faith in His plan prevailing through this battle. Once I got admitted to the hospital, I actually had to stay in the emergency room overnight because the condition of my body was so severe. They didn't have a room for me on a floor that could be well equipped or handle if I started to decline further. I then found out that I was septic. I was in heart failure. The tumor was wrapping around my heart, spreading down to my liver, and my body was really shutting down. I was in the hospital for 2 nights, getting procedures done, getting tests run, getting a biopsy of the tumor so they could determine staging and type, and getting a PICC line placed so that I could begin treatment on Tuesday morning. After multiple failed PICC line attempts, having to leave my babies, being alone in a hospital room, filled with uncertainty with what was going to come, it was a whirlwind of doctors, nurses, scans, medical language that I was not familiar with in my holistic health world, advocating for myself to get tests rushed quicker, to get people to be monitoring what was happening, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue, and just trying to be strong for other people while I was really feeling broken and just completely worn down inside. But faith really began to just whisper in the background that I wasn't alone, and that even when I didn't understand the why, the purpose in this plan would be revealed to me. And this was really when I started the shift from control to surrender. I realized I couldn't fix this. I couldn't hustle my way through it. I had to just trust in the process. I had to trust in the people that God brought into my life. And it was time for me to learn how to receive. As somebody who was always a giver, it was my turn to be cared for. It was my turn to give up control. And it was time to pause. It was time to hear God. And it was time to buckle up for a wild ride. In the middle of chaos, things can shift. Not necessarily in your circumstances, but in your heart. During this season, my relationship with God started to look a lot different. It was just an honest faith. It wasn't perfect. It was just raw and it was real. I had nothing to rely on besides God. I was telling everybody, I'm going to be okay no matter what. It's all going to be okay. Did I know that? Absolutely not. Looking back at how severe the extent of my disease was, did I have a reason to believe that? No, but God. I ended up being discharged from the hospital first thing on Tuesday morning. It was a necessity that I got over to the cancer center on Tuesday. I didn't understand at the time because in my head, chemo treatments were 1 day a week and then you had a couple weeks off and then you went back. That was not the reality I was about to face. When I arrived at the cancer center, loaded up with bags, I had a duffel bag, a lunch pail, a backpack, my purse, my Stanley cup. I was weak and frail, trying to carry all of these bags. A sweet nurse helped me. I had a brand new PICC line in my arm from that morning, still bleeding. And they started already to just surround me in love and comfort. I sat down with my doctor and he said, if we don't start today, you won't make it until next week. And even still, due to the extent of the tumor, you could suffer from something called tumor lysis, where when we blast the tumor, it could cause all of your other organs to shut down. And it's very likely that you will have a reaction to the chemo, and we are not sure if you'll make it through the rest of this week. That was the moment that I realized the extent of what I was facing. And it's just ironic because I'm really an all-in person. I don't do anything small. Everything I do is big and bold and over the top, and this was no different. I was placed in a chair closest to the nurse's station so that everybody could watch me for reactions, keep an eye because they were anticipating the worst. Worship music was playing on repeat in my headphones all week long. I probably prayed more in that week than I had in my entire life to date. The nurses and staff were so kind. They walked me through the whole process, and it was like I was thrown into a whole other world. As somebody who preaches holistic health, who modeled that for years with healthy living and nutrition, fitness, chiropractic care, all the non toxic things in my home, it's like I was in a different universe, one that I never wanted to be part of, one that I had always talked crap about. And here I went from doctor mode to patient mode in the blink of an eye. And that was something that was really difficult for me to wrap my brain around. I was told I was going to lose my hair, which I knew was a battle that I was going to have to face first and foremost because I'm a girly girl. And the thought of that was just horrifying. Little did I know what a blessing it would be to make it that far to lose my hair. But through all the trials of that week, God was there. My breaking point was where I released control. I was forced to slow down. I was forced to stop, to heal, to receive, to reframe what was important in life, what I had been chasing, what really matters, and recognizing that God was still good, even in the moments when life didn't feel very good. I went from doing to just being, and from fear to faith. From this surrender of my life came something brand new. It was a rebirth that reshaped everything about how I saw my life, my purpose, who I am as a person. I was stripped bare through this experience. I was faced with so much hardship and challenge, personally, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, professionally, you name it. This impacted every area of my life. It's funny that I had said when I first realized I was sick that I had cancer and I didn't have time for it because this didn't take anything off my plate. It just added a whole lot more. 5 days a week at the cancer center during my treatment weeks, chemo hooked to me around the clock, multiple visits every other week on my off weeks. But it became my home away from home. It became a place where I healed, where I received, where people held my hand, wrapped me up in warm, cozy blankets. People loved on me. And it was in that treatment room chair where I was honest with myself, where I got really real with God, and I received the greatest blessing of my life, which was the emotional and spiritual renewal and revival that followed. After an experience like this, you don't go back to normal. It's a new normal. But I decided that this part of my story would mean something. There was a purpose in it. And I had so much trust and faith in God's purpose and God's plan because I knew He wouldn't walk me through this without a reason. I relied on Him to feed me and water me through the valleys so that we could climb that mountain together and experience all of the beauty and blessings and abundance that this world had to offer for me, which is part of why I'm sharing my story, because He called me to not be quiet. For so long, I had quieted my voice. I wore a mask that I wanted the world to see of who I thought I should be instead of embracing who He called me to be. And this experience birthed a whole new purpose in my life. When you look at your life today, I want you to think about your purpose, what you're called to do. If you're living in that, or if you're just hustling from one thing to the next. Because every moment of our life, every week, every season, every journey has the power to transform the way we live, the way we lead, the way we serve. And this was that for me. The life that I was living before cancer wasn't a life to live. I was stuck in performance mode. I felt like my value and my worth were dependent on how much I produced, how much I performed, how many people needed me. I needed to be the end all and be all for every single person in my life, or I felt like I was falling short. I could not slow down. It was one thing to the next. I was avoiding what God wanted me to see. I was running away from His calling for my life. This whole experience forced me to rest. If we don't allow our minds and bodies to rest, they will force us to do it. And this was that. I started living slower, deeper, more intentionally. And that was hard. For me, silence was deafening. And it took me a very long time to learn to be okay in the quiet, because when things were quiet, my mind was the loudest. All of my fears, my anxieties, my traumas, the things that I were avoiding were right there, front and center, and they were yelling at me. I had to force myself to sit in the quiet and to sit with what I was feeling and experiencing so that I could process it and move through it. I also realized I had an extreme lack of boundaries. Boundaries are so important for our lives, for ourselves, for our family, for our relationships, for our work life balance, which I don't like the word balance because it's really all creating harmony. But boundaries keep the great things in. And it allowed me to prioritize what I was truly living for. Because what I realized is how much I was hustling and pushing, I was actually sacrificing the life and the people that I was building it for. And that started to no longer be okay with me. And establishing boundaries was not comfortable, but it was a whole lot easier after seeing what the lack of boundaries caused in my life. It was chaos, havoc, and a lot of resentment in a lot of different ways. This experience of being a patient also allowed me to really serve my patients and my team better, because it allowed me to see that I have to meet people where they're at. I was so headstrong in so many different ways, and I thought there was one way and one way only, and that's just not the reality. I started to lead with so much more heart and purpose. It allowed me to have a deeper level of connection because I had learned how to form such important, impactful relationships with people that through this time, the relationships in my life were thriving and were so fulfilling in a whole different way. My practice was exploding because I was showing up as exactly who I am, who I was created to be. I was no longer wearing the mask. I was just me, and I was loving and leading with heart and soul. It also completely caused me to restart and shift my focus on alignment and harmony, not just success. I love doing and having it all. We are all capable and worthy of doing and having it all, but we have to do it in a way that feels good, that feels true to us, in a way where we're not chasing burnout, but in a way that's sustainable. And so I learned what was really most important to me, and those values are what every decision in my life became based off of. It was so fulfilling for me to be able to help others find healing in every sense, body, mind, soul, after this experience, because I realized how much our mental health affects the rest of our body. And Evolve had a rebirth through this too. I redefined success as peace and purpose instead of performance. And what a beautiful transition that was in every aspect of my life. Every story comes full circle. Mine began with a really traumatic, difficult, potentially fearful experience. It evolved into faith. I'm so grateful for this time in my life, for the beauty in the battle, for all that it taught me, for how it was a pivotal turning point in my life, because I'm now living a life that I didn't even fathom I was capable of having. Sometimes when we go through extremely difficult circumstances and scenarios, it's not easy to choose joy. There are a lot of difficult moments, but there's also a lot of beautiful moments too. We get to choose how we face our hardships. We can do it alone. We can do it with being angry and fearful, or we can allow people to rally around us, to face it with us, and to give it to God and let His light lead our path into a beautiful life of potential and possibilities that only He can create for us. Sometimes we walk through the fire, but you come out refined. So I want to encourage you that sometimes the breaking makes space for the becoming. The day that everything changed was not the end of my story, it was just the beginning. And I think that's true for all of us. Sometimes it takes losing control to find your calling. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm so excited to share my heart, my life, my journey with you. I appreciate you following the podcast, sharing it with your friends. And until next time, let's evolve our lives together. Thanks for hanging out with me today on Evolve Your Life. If this episode inspired you, leave a review, share it with a friend, follow so you never miss a moment, and come connect with me on Instagram at Dr. Stefanie Ascher. Until next time, keep evolving your life boldly, beautifully, and unapologetically.